Okay, hello everybody, and firstly a big thank you to my good friend Marco for this opportunity to present. And this presentation is all about the planning and the preparation that goes into establishing an evidence-based training paradigm and ultimately a team that's willing to engage in it. And here we're going to consider how we can drive engagement by developing our team culture and ethos. And in the first half, we are going to talk about using the data to objectively map out the journey that we need to take. And so that will help us in defining the key movements, the key exercises, and the key tests. And then in the second half, we're going to talk about how the environment that we create can affect our decision to undertake this journey and how committed to it that we actually are. And so we're going to start with data because armed only with purpose and no idea as to which direction to aim it in, we can end up squandering all this motivation and energy on a series of wrong turns. And ultimately, that'll just lead to anger and frustration and burnout and potentially even to dropout. So I think data is hugely important, and I hope to convey the reasons for that in this first half of this talk. But to start, I think this is a really important point which is summed up as follows. So one of my favorite quotes is, if we have data, let's look at the data. If all we have are opinions, let's go with mine. And actually, this is how coaches probably need to think, especially in open skilled sports, where the result is also governed by the actions of the opponents, as well as countless other environmental factors. So opinion, intuition, gut feelings and the like are needed to manage and combat this uncertainty driven by the random, unpredictable nature of open skilled sports. And a large part of competitive success is likely based on the coach's philosophy, and that's their strategy. So when we do want to implement change, our challenge is actually to provide relevant and contextualized information to the coach with respect to their philosophy and strategy, and that positively influences some of the many heuristics used in their decision-making process. So when you think about then having to start this journey and build this data, where's maybe the best place to start? And I think one of the best places is probably YouTube, right? With YouTube, you can see every possible permutation of the sport that you're working in, from losing to winning, making comebacks to choking. You can also see every form of motor skill and sequence of, and therefore start to develop an understanding of the physiological and biomechanical demands of the sport. But then you have the opportunity to confirm or indeed refute your own understanding of these demands by looking at the research, where investigators tend to be able to more precisely isolate the various influencing factors. But then by watching actual competitions, you get to see what happens between matches. You see how athletes respond under pressure, what they eat and how they prepare. Ultimately YouTube is really just a highlight reel that misses all the important bits happening on the periphery, such as warm-ups and cool-downs, etc. And with all of these smaller cogs culminating into having a large impact on the overall performance. And then finally, we can speak to the coaches and the athletes, and we want to challenge our understanding and what we've learned before trying to establish some sort of consensus. We need to challenge our own confirmation biases. And there are lots of different forms of bias, but confirmation bias is when we believe that we've determined a pattern or a rule, or that we've discovered how things work, and then we interpret any new evidence as confirmation of those existing beliefs or theories, and we essentially become blinker to any other explanations around our observation. So also you can think of confirmation bias as like our heuristics, or rather our rules of thumb or our mental shortcuts. Now, these are actually really important in combating the millions of decisions we have to make each day. But without them, we would probably implode before leaving the house each morning, just deciding what to wear and to have for lunch. But we have to acknowledge their existence. And when it comes to science, we need to be able to switch off of autopilot. So, as an example, let me take you through my own journey of confirmation bias, which to be honest was only really saved by the boundaries of science, defined by Karl Popper. And, for me, I wanted to look at how fencers lunged, and for me it was all about finding this relationship between the stronger that they were, the quicker they would hit the target. But I couldn't find that relationship, no matter what I did to the data. It couldn't fit my bias. And then, I then started to think, actually, maybe I need to look at it in a different way. And speaking to the coaches, actually, what they tended to do was prefer to move further away. So they still hit them in the same time, but now they're standing further away. They're out of reach. And, another confirmation bias I had was in one type of sword, it was very alactic. I watched them. They would sprint at their opponent and hit them, and then walk back for what seemed like an eternity. There was no way there was going to be this build-up of lactate, or rather the fatiguing products that are associated with that. Turns out there was. Wrong again. This is crazy. And then I saw that in competition, and I kept getting proved wrong at every turn. But again, I was saved by the fact that I followed well-established guidelines for scientific investigation, and that it was testable, refutable, and falsifiable. That saved me from myself, or rather my confirmation bias. So when we write papers or consider a research question in practice, there has to be this testable hypothesis for it to be science. I have to be able to be proven wrong as a scientist, and I have to be open to that. And here's another example of that. I devised this training drill, and it was fantastic. It looked exactly like their movements within competition, the footwork drills and everything. But when you actually look at this conditioning drill that I developed right here at the bottom, you can see that compared to elimination bouts, we collected data within competition. Obviously, that was our reference point. You can see we're well out for their perception of how hard they're working, the blood lactate concentrations that they're picking up, their heart rate. It was terrible, even though it looked exactly like it. I couldn't believe it. But fortunately, I was acting like a scientist. I did challenge myself, and I didn't want to commit to this long-term program without testing it first. Right, team, let me just make sure I'm right. Turns out, I was well out. I was wrong, and so I then started to recognize, I have to chase the stimulus to bring about the right adaptation. So we started doing more conditioning work. It was more off-feet conditioning, absolutely nothing like fencing, but it got the stimulus that I wanted. And when they trained with a coach after, they could transfer that adaptation to something more sport specific. But again, it was because I measure it, because I check as I go, that I was able to interpret that and not commit on a long-term basis, 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, to some drill that actually just generated fatigue and gave nothing back, and then put them in a fatigue state when they're with the coach. Whereas this is off feet, which means they recover quicker relative to demands imposed on them by the coach in the session that followed. So once we've turned our training environment into a bit of a lab, so we're constantly testing ourselves and checking our hypotheses are correct, or adapting them as we need to, we can start to develop this training journey. Look, we have these we have the coaches' KPIs. Remember, we start with what their philosophy is, their technical, the strategy that they hold. And for example, in this scenario, the coach valued lunging distance, recovery from lunge, footwork, offensive pressure. So that's what we've got to map back to. Now we understand the physical qualities that map back to them or underpin them. We've got power, we've got braking strength, propulsive strength, and again reactive strength, anaerobic power, or buffer capacity, and what have you. And then we start to identify the tests that then improve those qualities, that therefore will help achieve the coach's KPI. So we have these series of tests. And then we finally have the exercises. We have exercises that improve the test, that therefore give you the physical qualities that map back to the coach's KPI. So we develop this journey, and again we see different relationships as we progress through our understanding of the sport, our understanding of the demands, the physiological demands, and how they map back in practice. And what I like here is that these are our tests, right? And for me, this is now about responsibility and accountability. As physical performance coaches, we have to see this as what we're here for. It's very difficult for us to be responsible for the strategy and the technical. In fact, it's not for us to do that at all. But if we agree that these tests determine the physical qualities that map back to the coach's KPIs, then we can say, look, we gave them the physical capacity to deliver your strategy, and that's what we should be held accountable for, and we managed to do that. And then when we think about the different exercises, then and athletes say, well, why am I doing these particular exercises? Well, because they improve this particular quality that matches back to how you need to compete. And then what we have here now is the core of an evidence-based training system. And if we've done that collaboratively, like we should have the whole way, we create this team buy-in. We create this approach that everyone understands why. And it's important that they can ask that question. And you should be able to say, we're doing this because. And if you can't answer that, you have to question why it's in there. Or maybe you lose the argument. If you lose the argument, it comes out. So there should always be the capacity to explain why. You've challenged your confirmation bias. You've looked at the numbers, the data, the conditioning drills that you've set, the training, and you're confident that they map back to these coaches' KPIs. We've got accountability now. We're responsible for delivering on this physical capacity. That's what we're held accountable for. And then what we've developed here is evidence-based practice. Okay, so let me just summarize this first half of the presentation. I'd say that the coach is always right. Okay, and maybe there's some caveats to that. And the caveat is unless the data suggests otherwise. And again, this is especially true in open skill sports. There's way too many factors involved. So we need that intuition, we need that experience, that wisdom. And of course, you can have all the data, but you need to be able to effectively communicate it, given their coaching philosophy and beliefs. You've got to put it in context. And as an example, we might suggest that coaches operate with wisdom-based practice, right? Which is a culmination of the experience that they've accrued, and the good judgment that's come from that. So they're operating out of intuition in part, and again, that intuition is built on education experience. There's a certain context. There's emotional intelligence that goes into it as well, understanding how each player is affected by each particular situation. And then on the other side, we have research-based practice, where we think it's all data-driven. The numbers will guide us in their entirety, and we say that if you do this, you probably get that. That's how statistics works, really. But what we need to recognise is that that's such a reductionist way. There's no way of us being guided just by numbers in an open skill sport. You need that intuition to plug that gap. And so it really is a culmination that when you put these two things together, the coach's wisdom based on their intuition, their experience, their judgment, and you combine that with the data, that's when you get evidence-based practice. People think evidence-based practice is research, is numbers, is data. It's not. Evidence-based practice is still the intuition of the coach. And what the coach can do that the data can't is understand each athlete. Again, that's that emotional intelligence, but also the values that each athlete holds true, and it needs to all work collectively together. So, again, as a warning to people that just use data within these environments, these open skill sports, is that often our view can be just way too reductionist. Often we take this complex whole and we break it down into tiny discrete parts and then assume that each has some independent control over the complex whole, and we hope that we've uncovered some sort of master switch that ultimately governs the entire system. And look, in reality, this is often not the case, and we shouldn't be surprised when, no matter what we do, no matter how many metrics we establish from these discrete parts, we can't seem to find a correlation that sticks. It doesn't work like you'd think. And so in open skilled sports, it's the technical rather than the physical factors that better differentiate between levels of competition. We can see that in the research. And so in sport, given that, we should generally be held accountable for match availability and physical preparedness, and measure yourself against these rather than whether we won or we lost. And I think from that point of view, then use closed skilled tests, because you're capturing the physical capacity at that point. The minute you add a skill element into it, you don't know really what caused that. Great athletes will do well there even though they have a low capacity, because their decision making is so high, or their skill is so high relative to that sport. And into part 2 we go now then. So we know what to do, right? We have a roadmap. But how do we get the staff and the athletes to engage in it and act on that buy-in that we've worked so hard to create? Well, certainly a driver for engagement is motivation, and that's what we want to be able to generate. And we're going to talk about how we do that through the training environment. We're going to talk about how we do that through our mission statement, our values, our training philosophy, and the culture that creates. I think these are really important parts of a good program, of a good training environment, and that's what we should certainly be looking to develop and wear those on our sleeves as well. This is a lovely quote. Don't ask how you can motivate others. Instead, ask how you can create the conditions in which they will motivate themselves. All right, so let's get to work on this mission statement, our values, culture, and our training philosophy. So the mission is how we aim to achieve the overall goal of our program. And I really like this as the mission statement: to create a high performance training environment where success is inevitable. And we can do that by virtue of the training map we just spoke about, and of course there's lots of other factors that go into that. But I'm just going to talk about values, culture, and training philosophy now. So values or your core values are the lenses through which you view the world, right? They underpin your biases and provide the context. And I guess they're what you deem to be life's, or rather your personality's, most important ingredients. And what's really important about them is that they can determine your attitude, which is how we think or feel about something, and behavior, which ultimately is then how we act. And that's why we need to know what our values are. So take some time and identify what your values are. Really important to do. When you're not sure what to do, they're going to guide your behavior. And look, these are some examples, and I really like these. I like adaptability, for example, because I think in sport the goalposts are always moving. We need to accept that and be able to adapt and respond accordingly to that. Also, I think compassion is a really important one. It just ensures that we see our athletes as humans with a life outside of sport, and not just an asset to the club or the team. With our values in place, it helps set standards and helps generate behavior, helps describe how we do things around here, and ultimately then that's the culture that you set. And again, these are really important to know what they are. All staff within the environment or operating the performance program or the program in its entirety should know what the values of the team are, your individual values, and the culture that you're trying to maintain and establish. Then there's obviously your training philosophy. Absolutely, important that you identify what this is. Again, helps you write your programs, helps others understand how you write programs, guide your decisions. For me, I really like this ready and robust. It says to the athletes that, look, I understand that if I keep you out on the field or keep you practicing with your coach, that's how you're gonna get better. And robust, because I want you to be able to turn up each and every week. I want you to be resilient to injury, because athletes want to play. That's what they want to do. And I could break these down into my priorities. And look, I've got match availability, career longevity, life after sport's a really important one as well. And then of course you've got physical capacity, and again, the human, they want to be able to engage in activities outside of the program. And so it's very much so about targeting injury reduction, and actually get a lot of buy-in for that, because that's what many athletes see as one of the most fundamental parts of doing strength and conditioning. And the rest of it then is to be able to deliver and sustain the technical and tactical KPIs of the coach. right? Remember, everything maps back to the coach. So this match availability. Now, people have tried to look at what it is that correlates to success, what predicts success, if you like. Nothing sticks, right? Except for maybe the squad that you have to choose from. And that comes back to making sure your players are robust and ready. Injury reduction, a really nice study, surveying in a big bunch of runners. Why do you do S&C? Number one reason, so they don't get injured. So play to that. You get 2 for 1. If you make someone less likely to be injured, you've probably done that by making them stronger. So you're going to improve performance as well. Equally, in another study, they looked at what affected an athlete's well-being, and as soon as an athlete gets injured, their well-being drops. Remember, it comes back to that compassion piece as well as part of our values. So we have now our mission statement, our the culture that we want to establish. How we do things around here. We have our values and our training philosophy. What we want to do is envelop that around our training map, because that's what creates the engagement, right? And so we put our values in, our vision in here is our overarching goal, a long-term goal, our mission statement. So we have our why, we have our how, and then we have our strategy there. These are the different points that we spoke about before. There we have our values, our culture, and our training philosophy. So collectively, this now becomes our training map. Remember, evidence-based practice is not just what the data says, it's everything. It's the holistic environment that you create that captures values of the athlete and the insights and the wisdom of the coaches as well. So in closing then, maybe consider what it is that separates you from other coaches, because we all kind of do the same stuff, right? We all do squats and sprints or jumps, plyometrics, weightlifting, whatever it might be. That's not really that much of a differentiating factor. So maybe it's not necessarily the program you write, but maybe the environment you create in which to deliver it. And I really like the saying that athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care as well. So let's think that both these factors, your capacity to write good programs through data and looking at these associations is fundamental, but it has to go hand in hand with your purpose, your values, and your training philosophy. So I wrote about this with a good team of colleagues if you're interested in reading a little bit more.